Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donoghue here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal, and I'm joined by the Irish Farmers Journal's editor, Justin McCarthy, to discuss the fallout of ABP's decision to halt the automatic collection of the EIF levy. Justin, a massive decision, a monumental decision in the history of the IFA. What has driven ABP to do this?
I suppose you're right, Patrick. It has a monumental impact maybe on the IFA. What has driven ABP? Well, according to the letter that ABP are sending out to their farmers, it's the level of disquiet that they've received from their farmers in relation to the, I suppose, opt-out or the mechanism used to collect the EIF levy, one where farmers effectively have to write to the meat factory to say that they no longer want the levy collected rather than to actually inform them that they do.
So it's an opt-in now rather than opt-out, because before it was automatically deducted. Will farmers actually sign up to this? Will they be proactive and sign in the form and return to ABP?
Yeah, Patrick, it works out €1.50 per 1,000 euros of output. I suppose really in ABP from Friday morning, I think, onwards, you have to write to ABP to say that you want that money taken out. Our figures would indicate that ABP typically take around anywhere between 350 and 450,000 a year from farmers through that levy and pass that on predominantly to the IFA and to a lesser extent the ICMSA. So that's going to have a significant dent in the income. I suppose we're all the same. You and I have to sit down, fill in a form and send it and post it in to ABP for this money to come off. And we all know the level. With the
best will in the world, though, Justin, will that happen?
We all know the level of inertia that creeps in. We see it every day in terms of companies trying to make things as simple as possible. This is nearly a step back in time, making it nearly as complicated as possible. And I think that is what has angered the IFA, and particularly what has angered the IFA is that they feel that this is in direct retaliation to the strong defence that the IFA have put up to the ABP Slaney Foods joint venture.
And the issue of levies, Justin, it isn't a new one. I suppose the fallout goes back 6 or 8 or coming up on 12 months now, when the whole issue of salaries paid to the former General Secretary of IFA, Pat Smith, and the former President of IFA, Eddie Downey, it was at that point where the levies really came under the spotlight. We've heard anecdotally that there's been a drop-off in levies, but is this a reaction to that, or how have ABP reacted to that? Are they hearing their farmers raise that concerns with them? There's
always been a bubbling resentment of the levy in that the farmers would have felt that it maybe impacted on how strongly IFA would have defended cattle prices. It certainly was starting to come more to the top in the latter years of Pat Smith's tenure, and since Eddie Downey took over as president. It was then thrust under the spotlight when everything was revealed in relation to, I suppose, the lack of clarity around the levy, how much money was going in, how much money factories were paying back out. And ever since last November, it has been very much under the spotlight. We're led to believe, the IFA have certainly said that it's around 100,000 a month the levy has dropped by. Industry sources would indicate that it could be significantly higher than that. And in fairness to the IFA, they probably don't know, because a lot of this is filtering through the system. The EIF levy typically amounts to about 5.3 million every year. Around €1.5 million of that is collected through the beef levy, 1.9 million through the dairy levy, and €1 million through March is the main three factors contributing to it. And certainly we would get evidence, certainly at March and meat factories, that the number of farmers contributing to that levy is declining.
So can the IFA survive, I suppose, and the question is twofold. Will others follow, and can the IFA survive? If they lose, ABP, if others follow, the knock-on effect of other processors, dairy co-ops, grain merchants, marts, if they withdraw their levy, can the IFA survive, and what do they need to do to address the drop-off in income?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, Patrick, in terms of a survival. There is no doubt the IFA have looked at alternative methods to the levy under the Con-Lucy review group, and there was a very, I suppose, clear decision taken that a hybrid system of membership plus levy was the fairest and most equitable system of collecting the funding. But I just feel that this is going to put levies back under the spotlight. Certainly if other meat processors decided and other levy collectors decided for this opt-in rather than opt-out, it would cause a major upheaval. And I think it would be prudent for the IFA, given the environment that we're now in, to be actually sitting down very closely and looking at an alternative method. One method we have proposed in the Farmers Journal is raising the question, should it just be farmers that would fund the IFA? And could a membership levy model be a hybrid model between farmers paying a membership fee and the industry that also benefits from the work that the IFA does, whether it be on TTIP or trade talks, that they contribute to it? Okay, it'd be very important that the IFA remained in total control of farmers, and that there was an oversight mechanism to ensure that this industry levy didn't conflict with the work of the IFA. But I don't think any of those barriers are insurmountable, and I think it would be a much more transparent and perhaps cleaner way of actually doing business than maybe the way the structures that exist around the EIF.
Call it, Justin. Will we have levies if we're sitting here in 12 months' time?
I think it'll be very interesting in the next 6 to 7 days as to what the fallout of this is. Traditionally, whilst IFA had a very strong and robust engagement with meat factories, they tended to do business like this necessarily behind the scenes by reaching a consensus. I think it's certainly a break from the norm to have this spat in such public view. It will be very interesting to see what other meat factories and other levy collectors actually do. But I think certainly the long-term view of the IFA has to be that this funding model, this EIF funding model, is now very much under the spotlight, and I think it would be prudent to be exploring all other options as to how the organisation can balance the books.
Justin, thank you very much. And for detailed analysis on ABP's decision to halt the automatic collection of the levy, you can see this week's Irish Farmers Journal on farmersjournal.ie.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
This week we've seen several co-ops increase their milk price for the first time in months, and a massive jump on the GDT. So, is the dairy slump really over? Dairy editor Jack Kennedy joins our digital editor Thomas Hubert to find out more.
What is happening, and is this real, Jack?
Yeah, it's very real, Thomas, and I suppose it's the first real good news that dairy farmers have had for the last 24 months. I suppose the fact of the matter are that, the majority of the co-ops have increased July milk price by 1 cent per litre. In effect, this will mean an extra €500 on the July milk check for most farmers. Dairy Gold then increased it by even further by 1.5 cent per litre. I suppose there was some disappointment that Kerry held milk price, so they held the price that they paid in June for July. But look at it; it's very real, and it's very good news for dairy farmers.
Why is the market getting better at the moment? What's happening?
There's a couple of things happening, Thomas. I mean, I suppose primarily supply is down across Europe and into Oceania. So, I mean, primarily the UK, which has had very poor milk prices for the last 24 to 30 months. July milk supply has fallen by close to 10%. So farmers are effectively not producing the milk because it's below the cost of production. And then some of the other big EU dairy players, France and Germany. Germany's down by 2.3% for the same week in the last week in July. It's down 2.3% compared to last year. So there's significant declines in supply. And the other couple of pieces that are very important as well, I suppose, is that the number of cull cows that have been slaughtered, dairy cows being slaughtered as a result of the low milk prices. So, I mean, we're seeing significant figures, and across the EU, slaughter numbers were up 5.2%. Between January and April compared to the same period in 2015, even though cow prices were lower. So there's a significant decline in the numbers of cows that actually can produce milk in the EU. And then the other, I suppose, key points are, I mean, the EU intervention piece in terms of they're continuing to support markets and put more product into intervention. There's obviously local competition between processors. I mean, Lakeland increased the milk price, so, in effect, processors in or near the Lakeland catchment area had to increase to follow suit as board members would put pressure on them. So, I mean, they're the main reasons, I suppose, why that there's better and improved milk prices.
And is this solid? Is this likely to continue? Because when we hear the co-op bosses this week, they're all using the same phrase, cautious optimism. Why the caution there?
Yeah, I suppose the caution is that, there's still a lot of negative influences on the market, such as the uncertainty over Brexit. Oil prices are still low, and they would be inextricably linked to milk prices. Intervention stocks are on the market, and they will probably overhang the market for another couple of months. And I suppose the one big one, a large exporter, New Zealand, is really just cranking up milk production now, and their peak months of supply are in September and October. So depending on what supply is like and depending on what the weather is is like in New Zealand, it will have a large influence on the supply on the market over the coming months. So while there's optimistic and cautious optimism, as you say, there's still a lot of negative challenges on the market that potentially could bring the rally in milk prices back down.
And no hope of going back into Russia anytime soon. So you have all that detailed in this week's Farmers Journal, and we'll keep updating milk prices as they come from the co-ops at farmersjournal.ie every day. Thank you, Jack.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
My colleague Odile Evans was at the Tullamore Show last Sunday, and she met MEP Mairead McGuinness. They talked about the growing restriction on farm inputs such as glyphosate.
I think the first thing to say is that right across the agriculture sector there is a move and a pressure to look at everything that's been used in food production at farm level. Antimicrobial resistance is a very big issue. It's been on the agenda now for at least, in my view, 10 years. It's only beginning to hit the headlines in the public debate now, but it's about human health. Now, I'm very firm in saying that the problem is not all about antibiotic use in farmers, in farm production systems, but it might be part of the problem, and therefore there's a need for across the agri sector to look at what's being used, to measure it firstly, to make sure that we're using the appropriate antibiotics and using them in the appropriate way. And I think that there is a reaction across the industry to try and meet those demands, because this will not go away across the world. And I mean, globally we're seeing problems with resistance to antibiotics in hospitals, and that could impact you and I at some stage in the future, and that's something that nobody wants to see. But right across the use of insecticides and pesticides, there's a questioning about, do we need to use products? What products should we be using? Are they being used appropriately? And can we look at other techniques to get the same results? And I think there's a win-win for farming in this. I talk to farmers here in Tullamore. They don't want to be using products unless they work for them and they're efficient for them, and that they can actually increase production and do it in a sustainable way. So it was good to hear and have a debate with farmers at the show about, the issues that they're concerned about. And these are something that I believe need to be taken by farmers themselves, take ownership of them and respond in a positive way.
And just on, the use of those kind of things with glyphosate, do you think that after the current 18 months, will that be taken off the shelf?
I think none of us know the answer to that, and I'm very open to the idea that glyphosate might go or it could stay. And I will look at the evidence that comes from the European Chemicals Agency, and they're based in Helsinki. They have the expertise, they will have all of the scientific papers, and they will make the assessment. Some member states have decided they don't want to use glyphosate. Ireland continues to allow its use under the proper conditions and with training of those involved. Let's wait and see what this review comes up with. If it indicates that glyphosate is safe and non-carcinogenic, because that is the concern, then it should continue to be used in a sustainable way. If there's any question mark about that, if ECHA raises concerns, then I think we're going to have to be very, very open and say that this product cannot continue to be used. But let's not ban something on an emotional basis. Let's ban it because we have clear scientific evidence that it is problematic. And I'm looking around here at farmers at Tullamore Show. I'm looking at their health and well-being when I make these statements, because I don't want any farmer to be using any products that damages their health or their safety, and I think that should be our guiding principle.
And you made an interesting point there about some sort of dairy global platform. What would your vision for that be?
Well, look, I've said this a few times, and I'm not sure that anyone's listening to me, but there has to be a logic in the major dairy producers of the world stopping the race to the bottom, where we have a situation that in New Zealand, where apparently they are so efficient they don't need any supports from government, but they are under horrible pressure financially, environmentally, economically. We have the US, okay, cheap grain is helping them at the moment, but there is no joy for dairy farmers across the globe in a relentless collapse of commodity prices. The idea, I think, will begin to gain traction. There is a global farmers organisation. I think it's a slow burner, but I think one farmer pointed it out in the discussion here that, Europe on its own can't solve it. And in fact, when Europe takes action, we help the world. We help ourselves a little, but we probably help the global situation more. It's a tricky one.
The Irish Farmers Journal weekly podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Also at the Tullamore Show, the Irish Farmers Journal agri-business correspondent Lorcan Allen met Alan Martin, an Australian beef farmer. Alan farms in Alice Springs in the Northern Territory, and the scale of his activity on the station is something else.
Oh, it's only a small station for the area. It's 700,000 square acres.
It's a lot bigger than anything here in Ireland. Tell us a little bit about how many cattle would you be running on the station?
Oh, at the moment, we're running about 7,000 head, cross between Shorthorn, Hereford and Crossherd.
And what's conditions been like in the beef trade, I suppose, in Australia been like this year?
Oh, the cattle price has been pretty good this year, like considering the season's been dry where we are, going back into a drought again, but the market's holding and organic sales where the money seems to be at the moment. So.
And what do you think is driving that? Is it export-led demand, or what's driving up the price of beef in Australia?
At the moment, it's probably more the Asian market. Their mills are becoming more westernised, so they're demanding more beef, and the Chinese market can't keep up with the quantities. So a lot of cattle going exporting to China, then there's a fair bit going into slaughter as well into China and America on the organic.
And I suppose transport a big issue for you from when you're getting your cattle and moving them to another part for slaughter. Like what sort of distances, or how big an issue is that?
Well, say example, my cattle, they'll go before they're slaughtered 3,000 kilometres or more, and that, then the cost is pretty expensive there. Like looking at nearly 20,000-30,000 just to move six decks, which is about 230 head of cattle that distance. So.
You spoke there as well about a drought period coming in Australia. What have the conditions been like weather-wise in Australia this year?
I just know from my area it's been pretty dry. We haven't had the rainfall over Christmas or early in the season where we do, but we have had scattered showers during like our winter season, which is now, but just not a lot of rain, and so things have just been real dry, and it's the joys of it, I suppose.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
The Taste of Cavan Festival took place last weekend, and the programme included a debate on the consequences of Brexit for Irish agriculture. One of the speakers was Charles Burns, a British farmer who chairs the Poultry Committee of the European Umbrella Farm Organisation, COPA. He met Irish Country Living editor Mairead Lavery.
You have relatives in Ireland,
yes.
Charles?
Yeah.
Whereabouts again?
The ones in Galway and Tipperary primarily.
And they're all farming?
They're all farming.
Okay. Now, you've a lot to say about the whole issue with regard to Brexit. Your view on the referendum decision made by the British people and why they made it?
I think they made it because basically they were told lies, and also they were frightened of immigration.
That was the real key thing.
That was the key thing, was immigration. And also the Remain campaign were giving negative reasons for staying or not leaving, where they should have given some more positive ones. Negative campaigns never really work.
No, that's quite right. You're saying that UK farmers, particularly in the whole area of horticulture and in your sector in poultry, are very reliant on non-British labour.
Absolutely. I mean, we couldn't. Those sectors could not survive without it. 60% or 66% of the workers employed in our processing industry are from EU or non-EU member states. Only 33% are UK.
And you're saying that it's not cheap labour?
No, it's not cheap labour. I mean, if you're somebody from Eastern Europe, a friend of mine is a big strawberry farmer, and he has 350 people at this moment picking strawberries, and they're being paid £100 a day.
But that's not bad money by any standards.
It's very, very good money. They work very hard, they earn it, but it's much better than the sort of £15-20 a day they'd earn at home. So naturally they're going to come over and get the money.
You make the point that the EU treaty is about the free movement of trade and labour, not people.
Yes, and I think that's where people got hooked up in the referendum. Nobody really emphasised the point that the treaty, when it was set up, talked about the free movement of trade and labour, and not free movement of trade and people. And where the UK people were upset is they got lots of stories of people coming over and being ill and going on our National Health Service, which they hadn't paid into.
Yeah.
And if you spoke to the elder generation, which was basically the people that voted to get out, that was their main gripe. I still speak to them now, and they still say to me, well, it's all these scroungers that came over.
But look, at the die is cast, the decision has been made. You and the other three British chairmen of the different committees in COPA will be holding on to your positions until elections next year.
Yes, I mean, because there's a lot of work to be done. We haven't even triggered Article 50 yet. After Article 50 there's 2 years, and there's still a lot of work to be done within the EU on greening, on other issues that we should be there trying to sort out. And you know, four chairmen out of the number in COPA are quite a lot just to remove.
It is. It's a lot from one country.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to be the format of the British exit from the EU?
Well, personally, I think, and it's only a personal opinion, I think that it's going to be we'll end up with something very similar to the Norwegian scenario, where they basically have to abide, because after all we still want to trade with one another. To trade with a country you still have to abide by their rules.
Right.
We probably have to pay a bit of money in, but it will require the EU members to say, come back to this free movement of labour, which is absolutely necessary to our industry, and not get hooked up on free movement of people.
Right. Listen, Charles, thank you very much. You're very welcome to the Taste Cabin. I hope you enjoy your time here, and thanks for talking to me.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
IFA President Joe Healy was also taking part in the debate. He spoke with our digital editor, Thomas Hubert.
One aspect that we discussed here is exchange rate and the way beef prices have evolved ever since the vote. Where do we stand on this, and how has the IFA advocated, and what do you think of the beef factory's response?
I suppose, first of all, any time that beef prices fall under the break-even figure of €4 per kilo is disappointing for Irish farmers. And we saw last year where the price between the UK and the Irish price for a similar type animal opened up to €300 per head, whereas the average over the previous 10 years was just €100 per head. And Irish farmers will accept a difference of €100 per head, but when it goes up above that, it's more than can be justified. We saw in the immediate aftermath of Brexit, Irish farmers felt that it was exaggerated by the factories, that it was used as an excuse to reduce the price more than what was justifiable at the time. And I know figures that we had at one stage would only justify a price cut of 7 cent per kilo, and still farmers were seeing a drop of 20 cent per kilo on the price of beef. So what we wanted from the very start as an organisation was that every sector of the industry to act responsibly and try and remain as calm as possible and not allow panic to set in. And that's no different this minute. There is a certain amount of uncertainty there, and the volatility in the exchange rate is probably the key one.
The debate you've just taken part in had politicians and other farm organisations represented, and one of the key points that was discussed is this uncertainty, and should we rush into Article 50, as it's called, and get the UK to act upon their vote and exit, or should we take our time and maybe hope that it won't go to extremes and will remain a kind of very close relationship? What do you think is a better avenue for farmers?
Well, I suppose it doesn't make any difference what we think, because it's up to the UK to throw in the ball and get the game on. And it depends on the farmers you talk to. Like, there's a certain element of farmers who would like it just the process to get underway immediately, and at least we'd have more certainty, or we'd be closer to certainty. But then there are quite a number of farmers, and indeed across all the sectors of society, that has, I suppose, maybe a hope, or maybe it's the heart rule in the head, a feeling that when we voted against certain treaties here, they were put back in front of us again to vote on again, and they're probably hoping that maybe that might happen with the UK. At the moment, that seems unlikely, but as one of the speakers mentioned up there, you never know what's going to happen. 2 years is a long time. There could be an election, there could be a change of government, and there could even be a campaign fought on if a certain party felt that the majority of English people or the UK people wanted to return or wanted to remain and reverse the vote. It's not beyond the bounds of possibility. So there's very mixed reaction. In answer to your question, Thomas, there's mixed reaction no matter how many people you talk to in relation to should Article 50 be put into action immediately or put on the long finger. Now, whether you'd be just hoping that if they do decide to put the process in motion and move it on as fast as they can, that it would give certainty, especially in relation to the exchange rate, because that is the big area for Ireland. Any movement in sterling affects the prices. Like I mentioned, how dependent we are on the UK.
One aspect, I suppose, is also the prospect of the UK going for cheaper imports. South America is mentioned all the time, and British farmer representative here said their first policy option was to ratchet up support for the Red Tractor, this brand that they have for British food. That could play against us, couldn't it?
It could. Look, the Red Tractor has always been an issue for Irish farmers, but, we have to accept that they're obviously going to try and safeguard their own produce, and the Red Tractor was one of the main areas and the main promotional aspects in relation to safety, quality of food, traceability. The Red Tractor was their quality assurance scheme, similar to we have the Board B quality assurance scheme. So that's acceptable. But, that's okay if agriculture in the UK has a big say in the negotiations of trade deals. Regardless of what's said or who tries to paint it up any other way, the UK has always had a cheap food policy. And we even saw that, and I think if you go back to the time of the BSE, and there was no beef being purchased, and when the supermarkets reduced the price of it significantly on the shelves, the beef was swept off the shelves. So to me, even though I think that goes back to 1996, but it says a lot about the attitude of people towards cheaper food. So, but what we need to ensure from our point of view is that there's an equivalence of standards, and that any trade deals involving the UK or involving any other Mercosur, TTIP, Canada, you name it, that there's an equivalence of standards, and that we ensure that the good, top quality food, the safe food that's been produced in Ireland and across the EU, that has the premium markets, and that's getting a premium price, and that it's not undermined by imports of just food that's produced at a completely different quality level to what we're producing.
Joe Eady, thank you very much.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
In this week's Irish Farmers Journal, we cover the latest developments in flood management and fears that last winter's devastating floods could happen again. Former IFA Flood Project Chair Tom Turley gave his views on the latest flood management plans published by the government.
We now have almost the middle of August, 8 months after the most horrific flooding events that the country has ever seen. We have a new government in place, many of whom were elected on the back of promising to do something in relation to the floods. The new government is in place for over 3 months. We were promised in the general election by all parties, bar none, that action would be taken. The Seas Farms report is out. It does give some suggestions. We want action now. People want to see the diggers moving in and doing some remedial work. Or are we faced again with a situation of people facing into a winter again with the possibility of their houses being flooded on the back of a government simply failing to live up to the promises? This work needs to start yesterday. As far as we are concerned, as in the landowners, the farmers, the householders along the River Shannon and other rivers, the talking is over. We've had the consultative period, we have a Sea Farms report, another consultative period is ongoing with that. But we know what needs to be done. And the talking is over, and action has to replace words now. We have a government 100 days in office that made many promises. People got elected on the back of this, and we have to see action. And we can't wait for any more time, because winter will be upon us again in 3 months' time. And are we going to tell the people, or are the government going to tell the people, that their houses could be flooded again because they didn't do anything? Because that's the truth of it. Till our Taoiseach Enda Kenny instructs his ministers to go and do some work, people won't believe that they'll be safe in their houses the coming winter.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
The Leaving Cert results are out, and we have a full CAO supplement in this week's Irish Country Living. Careers editor Mary Phelan takes us through the results for agricultural subjects, and she has tons of advice to help get started in college.
Well, today is D-Day, Ciara. We have all been there. The Leaving Cert Ag Science class of 2016 didn't do too badly at all. There wasn't much change in the number of students getting A's on the higher level paper this year. We had 10.3% of students getting an A. Last year it was 11.3%. The year before it was 10.9%. So really that's kind of unchanged, you could say. There was fewer people getting A's on the ordinary level paper this year compared to previous years. Just 0.1% of the the ordinary level ag science students got an A grade. That compares to 0.3% in 2015 and 0.6% in 2016. So really every year they don't seem to be kind of getting those A's on the ordinary level paper.
And that's really interesting, because there is a bit of a perception out there that if you're going to do ag science that you can really get good results, but it's actually one of the hardest subjects to get an A1 in, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if you just look at those grades that I've just quoted on the ordinary level paper there's no doubt about it. The students aren't getting the A grades on it. On the higher level paper, I mean, it's about 1 in 10 that are getting an A grade. But again, that's really because that means 9 out of 10 are getting a B and lower.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
I mean, people say that they're doing ag science, you know, that students even maybe without a huge interest in farming are doing ag science to get the grades, but really the stats are kind of saying otherwise, I think. And of course, then ag economics is a subject that we don't hear a huge amount about. There was 104 students at the higher level paper this year, 15 students at the ordinary level paper. 7.7% of students got an A on the higher level paper this year.
A lot of people are looking forward to hopefully going off to college in the next few weeks. And this week you've got a college survival guide. What are your top tips for those heading off?
So I spoke to 4 Farmers Journal interns that we have in the office at the moment. There's a lovely picture of them on the front page of my supplement. They're all still in college. They're going back to 4th year this September. They were kind of giving me the tips. Some of the things they were saying was get busy in the kitchen, learn how to cook 2 healthy meals. If you learn how to cook 2, you'll be doing well. You can kind of survive on that.
Because that's Monday night, Tuesday night for one of them. And Wednesday night, Thursday night, and there you are, back to Mammy then on Friday.
Back to Mammy on Friday, exactly. Other tips were to join a committee, whether it's for a club, society or in the student union. It's not only a way to make friends, but you can never start too early when it comes to doing up your CV and having a few impressive things on it. Someone else said to join the college bank. It's very convenient. Any of your banking matters, you can just sort them out on campus. Bring a packed lunch to save you money, and then plan a cleaning schedule with your housemates. Just stop those arguments before they have the potential to even begin.
Another interesting article that you have, Mary, is on part-time jobs. What is the situation now?
Things have definitely improved. So a lot of students do tend to work at home, whether it's in a local petrol station or a local restaurant. What Kate Donoghue, who wrote this article for the supplement, what she focused on was on-campus jobs. If you can get a job on campus, usually they will work it around your timetable. You might only have 3 lectures in a day, so you could either fit in a few hours, for example, in the student union shop in between your lectures. That's quite convenient, and what it means then is that you may have your weekends to yourself. Other jobs include an RA, so it's a residential assistant. So what you do basically is you're breaking up house parties, students that get locked out of their accommodation. You kind of sort out all those kind of matters, and in exchange for that you get free accommodation.
Wow.
So we all know how expensive rent is. We've been hearing so much about it. There's accommodation shortage as well, so that would really solve a lot of problems for a lot of students.
Absolutely.
Another thing is a lot of colleges have quite impressive sports centres now, so there's always lifeguard positions in them. A place where you mightn't think of looking for a job is the library. Every college has a library. And then things like being a promoter for a travel agency like Use It or Say It. They specialise in student and youth travel, so you can be a rep for them on campus.
Obviously, when you go to college, it's all about parties and nights out. They're brilliant times, great memories, but with the high sometimes comes the low. And I think it's very interesting that you did focus on low-level sexual assault in the form of groping. Tell me a bit more about this.
Okay, so basically students go to college. Really, it's the first time in their life probably that they have full independence when it comes to their social life. So money permitting, they can go out 7 nights a week if they want to. Well and good and all as that is, we were discussing nights out and everything here in the office. And I think, particularly among girls, I think every single girl that you talk to will tell you that at one point she has been groped on a night out. So whether it's someone putting their hand up your skirt or just putting their hand on your chest or whatever that is, every single girl has experienced it, and for some reason we don't really talk about it, we don't really write about it, we don't really highlight it as an issue. So I kind of thought that this was quite interesting, and I guess it's relevant to college students because given that they'll be going out so much more, there's also a little bit more of a chance that they will experience more of that. So I spoke to the Rape Crisis Network of Ireland, and they were saying that yes, groping has become normalised, but it is actually sexual assault, and you can report it if there's evidence there. You can get people, the Gardaí can investigated and somebody can be charged for doing it. And I also spoke to the Union of Students of Ireland, and they were saying that really more people should be reporting it, because what happens is when low-level sexual assault like that isn't reported, isn't commented on, if you just kind of let it go, it kind of creates this culture of silence around sexual assault, full stop. And it means that when more serious incidents happen that will tend to have more serious effects on people, they will feel a bit more reticent about complaining about it and about reporting it, because really that culture isn't there and hasn't been encouraged in Ireland. So there's more about that on page 26 in the CEO supplement this week.
And just to wrap it up, give me a very quick rundown on what else is in the supplement.
So we have 2 pages that are dedicated entirely to the dreaded house hunt. So lots of tips in there, I think particularly for students and families where no one has gone to college before. You don't really know where to start, so I would encourage you to look at that. And then of course on page 1 it's very important to know what's the next step. The CAO offers are coming out next Monday, so all the kind of technical details of where to go from here are there. And then we have a roundup of the kind of weirdest and wackiest societies on campus, like the Harry Potter Society in UCC, for example.
You really want to hear more about that. So if you've got your Leaving Cert results today, if you're planning on going to college next year, or you're a parent that has just gone through the whole Leaving Cert in your household, Mary's 8-page education supplement is one not to be missed in this week's Irish Country Living.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.